Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We are continuing to take a look at the projected win totals for every Power 4 team as we inch closer and closer to the start of prediction season here at our channel. And today we're diving into the Big Ten, which is absolutely a super conference in 2024. 18 conference members this season, thanks to the addition of Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Washington from the Pac-12. And this is going to be a conference that very well could get 2, 3, maybe 4. That might be too big of a stretch, but a handful of members into the new 12-team college football playoff. So welcome back, guys. We're so glad you could join us today to break down these projected win totals. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of our expert picks, some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country. You do not want to miss out on that, guys. You're guaranteed to win big with us there. You're going to get exclusive content if you sign up early. Do not miss out on that opportunity to do that. And do not miss out on the opportunity to send us some of your team's gear. We've got some Big Ten representation up here. We'd love to get more. We'd love to represent your team in every single Gridiron Expert video. We'll give you that shout out. We'll have them on display all year long as you become a member of our GE Nation. And we promise you, you do want to be a part of this as we inch closer to the season, because it's going to be one heck of a year here at our channel. So let's take a look at the win totals, guys. We'll try to go through them a little bit quicker. We've got 18 teams to run through. Obviously, the usual suspects are up at the top. The top 4 teams based on these win totals: Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State. And as we've said over and over again throughout our offseason analysis, those are the top 4 teams in the Big Ten. Some would say in that order. But Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, or Penn State, when you're talking about the Big Ten and maybe a team getting to the playoff, those are the 4 teams that you're talking about maybe slipping in there. Ohio State and Oregon at the top, over under 10.5 wins this year. Not surprised to see that in the slightest. They got to play each other. So one of these teams is going to slip up, right? One of these teams is guaranteed to have a loss because Ohio State and Oregon do have to play each other in Eugene in October. But Ohio State, you look at them. They're a loaded team. Their 3 toughest games are Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan. I would say out of those 3 games, the only one right now that I think they might be an underdog in is the Oregon game. So that kind of goes in the Ducks' favor. But then Oregon, they've got to play, obviously, Ohio State. They have to go to Michigan. They have to go to Wisconsin. So very good chance both these teams could go 11-1. We know how difficult it is to go undefeated in college football, but still 11 wins is going to be good enough to get you into the playoff. And for one of these teams, good enough to get them in to the Big Ten Championship. Michigan, the reigning national champions, alongside Penn State, both at 9.5. A lot of changes for both. Penn State, 2 brand new coordinators. Michigan losing tons of pieces from that team that went on to go undefeated and win the national championship last year. So how do both those teams respond to that? The Wolverines do have to play Texas. They got to go to Washington. They get to host Oregon. They got to go to Ohio State. So some of the bigger games for them, Texas and Oregon, are at home, but that road game at Ohio State certainly looms large. I think it's going to be a game where Michigan, despite winning the last few meetings against the Buckeyes, is going to be an underdog in that game. And how they fare in week 2 is really going to be a good sign of what's to come for Michigan as the year goes on. If they can beat Texas, sky's the limit. If they lose to Texas, the margin for error is very, very slim, certainly in terms of making the playoff. But the margin for error in terms of maybe hitting their season win total over, getting to at least to 10 wins, could be very slim as well. Penn State, we mentioned those 2 new coordinators. How do they fare? What can Drew Aller do? Does Drew Aller take a big step forward at quarterback after a pretty subpar performance last year and a subpar passing attack in Happy Valley? The Nittany Lions have to go to West Virginia for their season opener, at USC, at Wisconsin. They host Ohio State, but they haven't been able to get over the hump over the Buckeyes for, 7, 8 years now? I mean, it's been a pretty long drought. So Penn State's got to find a way to win these big-time road games, and it's got to find a way to beat 1 or 2 of the top dogs in the Big Ten to finally get to that college football playoff. And, this is a team that's made multiple New Year's Six bowl games under James Franklin, and that's great. But now with the expanded playoff, missing out, there's no excuse. After that, you see a bit of a drop, guys. Look at that. So many teams at 7.5. USC, Washington, Nebraska, Iowa, Maryland. Maryland, at some books, has dropped to about 6.5. So some of these, win totals are a little bit different, but a majority of these teams around 7.5. USC, a newcomer to the Big Ten this year. Interesting to see them so high. Obviously not going to have them low, but they had a disappointing year last year. They lose Caleb Williams. They lose Alex Grinch, which is a good thing, but the defense was very, very bad. They've got a tough schedule. They've got to play LSU in Vegas, at Michigan, at Washington, Penn State, Notre Dame. Very tough schedule for the Trojans here. If you take the over, you're saying they're going at least 8-4. something to kind of watch out for there. Is USC good enough to achieve 8 wins? Are they going to struggle a little bit in arguably a tougher conference than the Pac-12, even though the conference last year was very, very solid? Washington, to me, this is a very high mark for the Huskies. A team that is dealing with a brand new head coach as Kalen DeBoer left to go to Alabama. They lost Michael Penix. They lost practically the entire offense. They lost practically the entire team that was the national runner-up last year, and the over-under is set at 7.5. The Huskies have a really good early part of the schedule that could see them start 4-0. But then they got to play Michigan. They got to go to Iowa. They've got USC, at Penn State, at Oregon. Having them at 7.5 feels a little high to me. Again, we're not predicting games today. I'm not telling you they're going to hit the over. I'm not telling you to hit the under. We're going to have our predictions coming out very soon. All the more reason to subscribe, hit that notification button, and check out our videos nonstop because it's coming your way here in just a few weeks. But Washington that high, to me, is a bit of a shock. And I just don't know if they have the talent right now to hang in this transition period for this program, especially with new leadership and with tons of key new pieces. Kind of the same can be said for Michigan, although I think they're in a better spot than the Huskies. Then you've got Nebraska. Is this the year that Nebraska finally gets back to the postseason? We're not talking about just 7 wins. We're just get to 6. Get to 6 wins, and Nebraska should be happy. 5 of their first 6 games are at home for the Cornhuskers. So that's massive. The only one that's not is a road game at Purdue. So a 6-0 start for Nebraska is not out of the realm of possibility. If they can get that, there's a very good chance they hit their over. They've got to go to Ohio State, got to go to USC, got to go to Iowa, but they can win a few of those. They can win a home game against Wisconsin. Nebraska is one of those weird anomalies, guys, where they've been so close, so many close one-possession losses. They're a much better team than their records have shown. Matt Rule's a miracle worker, typically hit this stride in year 2. Maybe this is the year Nebraska gets over the hump. Iowa at 7.5, can they find an offense? Can Iowa find an offense? 7.5, they're a perennial 7, 8, 9-win team, even when they don't have an offense. Not surprised to see this mark where it is. Iowa actually avoids Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State. They avoid 3 of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten. That could be the difference maker, really, in terms of the Hawkeyes hitting that over. Then Maryland, another team like Nebraska that could have an easy 6-0 start. Pretty favorable schedule to start. The back half, very, very difficult. USC, Oregon, Iowa, Penn State. Very tough schedule for the Terrapins. They lose a lot of talent, obviously, from last year as well, but a lot of young talent on the rise there. So you go through that, guys. Then you get to the teams that are fringe bowl teams, right? Kind of surprising to see Wisconsin in this situation. This is a team that last year, I think a lot of us thought Wisconsin could challenge for a Big Ten title, at least making the championship, right? They fell flat on their face in year 1 under Luke Fickell. Now the bettors, the odds makers, have them a little lower. We're not really buying the bait yet. 6.5 wins, kind of a fringe bowl team. The reason why is Wisconsin has a very difficult schedule. They've got a home game against Alabama. They got to go to USC. They got to go to Iowa. They got to go to Nebraska. And they get to host Penn State and Oregon. So they get to host Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon. What a home slate for the Badgers. The question is, can they win those games? If they do, you're not talking about Wisconsin hitting their over. You're not talking about reaching the win total. You're talking about them being a Big Ten title contender, no doubt about it, nationally recognized. But otherwise, this could be a team that really is another just 6, 7, 8-win team. Mediocre season, decent bowl berth, but nothing to kind of really hang their hat on. Nothing based on Wisconsin standards like we've seen in years past. Everybody else after Wisconsin, based on these odds, is right under the 6-win mark. So kind of maybe bowl, maybe not. Rutgers is a team that I actually feel relatively confident in making a bowl game. It's a team that won 7 games last year, returns plenty of talent, seems to be hitting their stride. They've got a tough stretch early on at Virginia Tech, at Nebraska, at USC. This is a team that very well could be just around 4-4 entering the month of November, but November is very favorable for the Scarlet Knights. Minnesota, at Maryland, Illinois, at Michigan State. Very, very winnable games there. Win 2 of those, you're going bowling, you hit your over. If they're 4-4 at that mark, obviously. We're not predicting them, just saying that odds are it could be the case. Rutgers should be a bowl team, 5.5. I think the over actually might be a very solid bet there. Northwestern, this is a weird bait game here, right? Northwestern won 8 games last year. You look at them and you go, 5.5? Why the drop? Because of the final 6 games. They're not going to win their first 6 games. We know that. They might win a couple. The final 6 are brutal. Wisconsin, at Iowa, at Purdue, Ohio State, at Michigan, Illinois. Back-to-back games against Ohio State and Michigan? No, thank you. I don't want that. So, Northwestern might only win 1 or 2 of those final 6 games, which means they're going to have to do the majority of their damage in the first 6 games if they want to get to the postseason. That's why Northwestern's total is so low. Also on the fact that I'm not saying last year was a fluke, but obviously we can't base it off this one-hit wonder that was David Braun, that was this Northwestern team. A great story last year, but can they continue the success? Michigan State, year one under Jonathan Smith, coming over from Oregon State, 5.5. Some books now have them down to 4.5. It's a rebuilding project. It's going to take a while. Michigan State is a dumpster fire right now. They're not going to become immediate contenders in 2024. They've got a lot of questions on both sides of the ball, new coaching staff, new schemes. Not expecting a whole lot out of them. I think that number, honestly, is about right. They also have to play Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan in a 4-game stretch. 3 of the best teams in a 4-game stretch. Not favorable enough to really wear and beat down a team. UCLA making the transition to the Big Ten from the Pac-12 at 5.5. Here's the weird thing about UCLA. You look at the beginning part of their schedule. They have at LSU, Oregon, and at Penn State in a 3-game stretch there. That's brutal. So after about 7 games, they might be around 4-3 at the best. That's assuming they lose those 3 and win all the other games, and that's not a given. 4-3 at the best. Then you go down to those final 5. They still have games at Nebraska, at Washington, the home game against USC. UCLA, first-year head coach for them as well. Getting to a bowl game, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, that would be a successful year for the Bruins. That's good enough. So 5.5 is the right total. Getting to 6 would be phenomenal, but that's going to be easier said than done. Illinois, Indiana, both very intriguing teams to me. I really look at Illinois. This is a team that I think could be favored in 5 or 6 games this year. But they do have tough games against Kansas, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon. So like a couple other teams, Illinois getting 3 of the 4 best teams in the conference that they've got to face. Not good for a team that's not one of the better teams in the conference like the Fighting Illini. Indiana's an intriguing team because Curt Cignetti's one heck of a coach, and he's bringing in a pretty solid transfer class into Bloomington. Indiana didn't have talent last year, but they're bringing in talent. That's the nature of college football now. Got a great coach after a remarkable run at James Madison. You got tons of talent coming in. If they can gel together, Indiana could be a surprise team in the Big Ten this year. If they can win their 3 non-conference games, their 2 toughest road games are at Ohio State and at UCLA. A lot of winnable home games for the Hoosiers. Do not sleep on them. And then finally, Minnesota and Purdue. Both teams I do think will struggle quite a bit this year. The Golden Gophers offensively have got to figure something out. They do get 6 of their first 8 games at home. So that's one thing that is going in their favor. So something to watch out for there for PJ Flex Squad. And then Purdue, 4.5. Their non-conference slate is Indiana State, Notre Dame, and at Oregon State. There's a chance they go 1-2 in the non-conference. If you go 1-2 in the non-conference, you're going to struggle in conference play as well when you're facing some of the top dogs, such as Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. Once again, somehow, one of the worst teams in the conference drew 3 of the top 4 teams in the conference. Crazy how the scheduling worked, but Purdue could be in for another rough year as they continue to try to rebuild this Boilermakers program. So, guys, there you go. The Big Ten win totals for all 18 teams. Leave your thoughts below. Who's too high? Who's too low? Who's going to hit the over? Who's going to hit the under? Leave your thoughts below. And then, of course, we want to hear your predictions when we break down every single game for every single one of these teams. That's coming up here in just a couple of weeks. All of them a reason to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Check out everything down in the description below, including our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of our expert picks. You sign up early, you get exclusive access. You do not want to miss out on that. Go check it out. The link's down in the description below. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.